JJK Chapter 228 spoilers are here, and I know the past few chapters have been extremely hyped with all the Sukuna and Gojo action, but I can safely say that this one is probably one of the most, if not the most exciting cliffhanger in a chapter that we've gotten in quite a while just because of what happens at the very end. The best part about it is that Sukuna finally does something that we've been waiting for this entire fight, but without getting ahead of myself, let's get right into it. The chapter starts with someone saying a small barrier would logically enhance the stability of the barrier, but it looks smaller than a basketball. Kusakabe says impossible again in disbelief, but Mei comments how many times they've said impossible already, which is true. You know, Kusakabe said, oh my god, that's impossible, like 3 or 4 different times in this fight, kind of hammering home how insane this battle really is. So we're immediately cutting back to what happens at the very end of the previous chapter, where Gojo expands his domain to engulf multiple buildings and then suddenly shrinks it to the size of a ball. Kusakabe argues that usually trapping yourself and your opponent inside a barrier with mass less than you would collapse, but Choso enlightens them, saying Gojo is pulling this off by using his experience from being trapped inside the prison realm. And I kind of think this is Gege speaking through Choso, giving us a brief explanation as to how Gojo found out how to do this so quickly. It was more than likely a trick he had up his sleeve. This also kind of goes back to the moment that Gojo's unsealed and he says that he underwent some special training while he was sealed away. This might be the first glimpse of it that we're actually seeing during this fight, as you know, all that time that he was trapped in the prison realm, it would make sense that he learned a couple things, and it would make sense that one of those things was observing the prison realm itself and kind of figuring out how it works and implementing it into his own domain. Kusakabe again starts wondering how they can change their domain conditions, especially because it's a mix of a lot of conditions. Higuruma and Hikari are both surprised by this, to which Kusakabe answers that their domains are an exception because their domains are built within their curse technique. So again, this is Kusakabe just hammering home how complex of a situation this is, that they're both adjusting their domains on the fly like this. And also mentions something pretty interesting that I didn't really think of before, and that some of these rules don't really apply to Hikari and Higuruma in particular, or maybe they're a little different because their curse techniques don't kick in unless they use their domain expansion. In this sense, you really can't have one without the other. For example, Hikari can't use his private pure love train unless he uses his domain expansion. So I thought this was an interesting detail. I don't know if this is going to come back into play later, but maybe it's just Gege kind of going through the nuances of curse techniques and domains to kind of deepen the power system a little bit even mid-fight, which I think is pretty cool. But Mei says maybe Gojo wanted to try and cover Malevolent Shrine's whole range. Just then, Gojo's domain barrier starts to tremble heavily. Yuta realizes that even Sukuna must have adjusted to the shrine's range and enhanced the output. Angel says if the barrier is destroyed, then Gojo is finished. Immediately after this, Gojo's domain barrier breaks once again. We see the shrunken domain completely crumble and explode, and Gojo and Sukuna re-expand to their original sizes. Yuji, watching the scene unfold, gets nervous, but Sukuna's shrine also starts to fall apart one by one. So yeah, Gojo's domain started to crumble, but also Sukuna. So this is the first time we're actually seeing this happen, even though we've seen Gojo's domain get destroyed like 3 different times by now. Well, even more surprisingly than that, we get this panel that says Sukuna is injured as his domain collapses due to the battle against Gojo. So it's a real shame that we didn't see what happened inside the domain clash here, but apparently Gojo went ham on Sukuna and dealt a pretty heavy blow, making it to where he couldn't maintain his domain expansion anymore. And everyone watching the whole fight gets super hyped, like I'm sure many of you did, because this is the first time since the very beginning of the fight when Gojo used 200% hollow purple, and maybe when he hit him with the reversal red, that Sukuna took this much amount of heavy damage. Higuruma says since both Sukuna and Gojo's domains collapsed, now both of them can't use curse techniques. And Maki adds Gojo can heal his burnt out curse technique like he did the last time, but Angel says since Gojo showed that in front of Sukuna, now Sukuna can do the same. With just one time of Kenjaku helping Sukuna split his soul into 20 cursed objects, Sukuna already learned how to do it himself, like how Sukuna transferred himself into Megumi. And just like that, Sukuna can also recover his burnt out curse technique with just Gojo showing him once. I think that's pretty freaking ridiculous. I mean, it was already crazy enough that Gojo showed that he can heal his own curse technique with reverse curse technique, but now we know that all Sukuna has to do to learn something is just observe it once. Gojo and Sukuna resume their battle. Gojo kicks Sukuna and starts to wonder why Sukuna isn't trying to use a curse technique other than the shrine. In fact, until this domain was destroyed, Gojo had been beating Sukuna for almost 3 minutes, so he wonders why Sukuna is taking such a risky option here. And Gojo's bringing up what probably a lot lot of people have been wondering, why hasn't Sukuna been using Megumi's curse technique and utilizing the 10 Shadow Shikigami or Maharaga? Well, I think Gojo spoke too soon, because after this, Gojo tries to understand why Sukuna hasn't used the 10 Shadows yet, and Gojo knows Sukuna has the memory of him and Megumi talking about Maharaga. Just as he was wondering, Maharaga's wheel clicks a turn and Gojo feels dizzy, and his nose starts to bleed. So just like that, the moment that we've probably all been waiting for, Sukuna is finally starting to utilize the powers of Maharaga, and just like that, shit is about to get real. Immediately after the click, Gojo's nose starts bleeding, which definitely isn't a good sign. And if we learned anything from Sukuna's fight with Yorozu, it seems like he knows how to use Maharaga's abilities already in a very clever way, and can easily trick his opponent. So this chapter leaves off on a bit of a cliffhanger, but one thing can be sure, that Gojo is in some deep trouble in the next one. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Please subscribe and turn those notifications on, because I cover JJK spoilers and chapters as soon as they're released. So I'll probably have a full chapter review for this one probably within the next day or two, so you don't want to miss that. That is it for this one though. Have an absolutely wonderful night or morning, whatever, and I'll see you guys in the next video.